Is there a way out? Can I change my brain? Am I just a victim to who I am? I'm your host, Steve Sisler. Stay tuned for another episode of Behavioral Insights.
Well, here we are. It's been several weeks, and back in the saddle here, episode 38. And we're going to be talking about responsible conscious agents. Are you one of them? Coming up next on Behavioral Insights. I often define responsibility as one who is able to respond. And that's really what responsibility is all about. It's an ability to not only respond, but to respond in an effective way. You can call that healthy. You can call that, whatever you want. But responsibility means when we are responsive in situations basically out of our control, we respond in a way that creates resonance as opposed to dissonance, that creates harmony as opposed to disharmony. And so typically when I talk about responsibility, I'm talking about parents, I'm talking about teachers, I'm talking about leaders in general. Anyone who functions with any type of subordinate around them. So that's what we're going to do today. So I'm taking these 9 characteristics that we're going to go through. And normally I teach these in relationship to parents and children, but management is also a parents and children model, as well as leadership is a parents and children model. They all fall under the same model, where somebody is in a place of authority, and there's an acceptance of responsibility in that place of authority, and other people are waiting on some sort of instruction so that they know what they need to do in an effort to aid the person in authority, and all of them together achieving some sort of a goal. And that's what leadership is all about. In one sense, there's a million books on leadership, so people pick and choose what they want to talk about leadership. But today we're going to be talking about these 9 components that really help define a responsible agent in the world. So let's talk about the first component, and it is guidance. So guiding, the ability to guide. So what is guidance? Guidance is when we assist people through potential difficulties. When it comes to children, it's when they're going through their formative years. When it's people in a management role, it's when they're navigating a new environment in the workplace, or navigating difficult people, whatever the case may be. A guide assists you through potential difficulties. They don't do things for you, but they act as guardrails. As a guide, think of a tour guide, pointing out potential assets, pointing out potential liabilities along the way. And this is all in an effort to ensure that people are going to reach their destination. The destination is always what the goal is all about. So why am I in this role? Why am I in this family? Whatever the case may be. So the first rule of thumb is to be a guide. Are you guiding people? Are you guiding them through difficult times? Are you there to point the way, to help them read their map, and things like this? Oftentimes in a company, people join a company, and because they've done something similar in the past, there's no guidance. We hired you to do a job. Why can't you do it? That tends to happen a lot. But people need to slow down and remember that a lot of people need guidance, and that's not a sign of weakness. It's really a part of learning, and we are all in this world, and we're learning while we're in it. So guide is number one. The next one is guarding. Guarding. In a child context, this is keeping children safe from harm or danger. It's really carefully watching over them. It's not as much guidance as it is looking out for them without their permission, keeping an eye on them. So my son was just here for Christmas. He drove in from Colorado, and then he went home after Christmas. So, we had the app where we could see where he is along the way. He checked in with my wife periodically. What were we doing? We were guarding. He's 25 years old. Does he need our guidance that way? Not necessarily, he does. But the world is rough. Him and my daughter driving together through Colorado hit a deer one time and were nearly killed. And so things can happen. So being a guardian, don't think prison guard. A guard is just being there and being aware of what dangers can potentially become available during any course of actions, and then keeping a watchful eye simply because you love and respect the person. So managers, guarding people, what does that look like? Well, sometimes there are those people in organizations that just have it out for certain people for one reason or another. And a good leader acts as a guard. So rather than throwing their people under the bus in an opportune occasion, they guard them, they protect them, they watch over them. And in that process, they stand up for them as well. So we've got guiding, we've got guarding. So guiding is careful assistance through difficulty. Guarding is watching over people under our care. The next one is governing. We got guiding, guarding, and governing. So what is governing? Governing is really about exercising a directing or a restraining influence over an individual in order to provide better outcomes for them through times of difficult decision making. So think about governing bodies. They take on the responsibility of making sure certain processes and protocols are in place and so forth and so on. So governing a child may involve setting up boundaries, setting up some rules, bringing definition to those rules. It's a directing or a restraining influence. It's a pointing the way. So where guidance is assistance, governance is direct. It's a form of directedness. And so, children, back on the children piece here, oftentimes experience peer pressures and different things like this. So maybe governing a child might look like, listen, I think hanging around Billy is a really bad idea. Billy never seems to have your best interest at heart. And so in this situation, I'm going to keep you home from that gathering if he's going to be there, because it's not in your best interest, even though you know Susan's going to be there and you're all excited about that. I understand that. But I'm going to exercise a restraining influence here for your best interest. And I'm not doing it with the sense of because I said so and not leaving them without reason. We as parents and leaders never do that. Don't leave them without reason, because then it feels unreasonable. So if you don't provide reasons, then this will backfire pretty quickly. So reasons have to be given for anything you're going to do that's going to directly affect another person who's under your authority or care. End of story. I have my reasons, but I'm not sharing them with you, is really immature and a sign that there's other problems and they're not theirs, they're yours. So I don't want you to not provide logical reasons for why you are exercising some kind of a restraining or directing influence over a child or subordinate in any way. So those we call the 3 Gs: guide, guard, govern. All right, let's move on. Directing. This is the next piece. Directing. So this is a management and a supervisory role. It's really, it's akin to guidance, but it's more authoritarian. So to manage and to supervise is to sort of a hands-on assistance in directing the course of an action with people. So directing could look like this. I need you to get your room straightened up. We've got company coming over, and I don't want it to look like, a pig pen. So that would be directing. Here's what I need you to do. Here's what I want you to do. Now, you have to provide reasons for these things. I want you to straighten up your room because we've got company coming over, and I don't want people in here tripping over everything. I don't want them in here, seeing your dirty laundry. I don't want that particular toy being played with by, Sally, because she's pretty destructive on toys. So why don't you put that in your closet so she doesn't see it? Blah, 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 blah. That's with children. Directing subordinates in work, managing and supervising them. Here's what I need you to do for me. Here's what we need to accomplish today. So you provide direction. So directing is providing a pathway. It's providing direction so that they can know what is expected. This is how they know what to do. This is maybe how they know when to do it if they haven't figured that out on their own. This is how they can, be given direction. And so as a leader, we are to guide our people. We are to guard them. We are to govern them. And we are to direct them. Is this for all time? No. This is until people basically learn to drive. If you've ever taken driver's education and you've never really driven a car before, this is what happens. Okay, we're coming up on this exit. Remember, 500 feet before the exit, we want to put the blinker on, or whatever the case may be. So this is a yield. It's not necessarily a stop sign, but you need to pay careful attention here to see the flow of traffic. Is anything coming? You have to look this way, and then ease into the traffic pattern as you are able and as cars make it available. So, without that direction, things can go awry pretty quickly, simply because we can't make assumptions that everybody knows exactly what to do and when to do it. They don't. So that's important. All right, the next one, protecting. So even though I'm bringing up some of these terms underneath the other terms, like guarding, keeping people safe, protection is just that. It is protection. It's defending from attack, invasion, loss, or insult. If you've had kids and you've been in public places and you see other children insult your child, invade your child's space, take something from theirs, or attack them, you know as well as I do, as a parent, typically you get up, you go over there and you break it up, or you retrieve the item that was taken, or whatever. I remember years ago, my children were really small when Pokemon was really coming on the scene big. And we had been to Burger King or something like that, and then we went to a park. And in the Burger King, with your meal, if you got a kid's meal, you got some Pokemon cards. Well, these Pokemon cards weren't Pokemon cards, not the Pokemon cards that everybody was after for trade and so forth. They were cards that reflected Pokemon in one way or another. But it was Burger King's version of Pokemon. So, they were an off-brand, I guess you could say, of the Pokemon cards. And my kids didn't know the difference. They were just very young. So they were sitting at a picnic table and going through their cards. And this one kid just brazenly, walked up to my son. And he goes, "What do you got there?" And he just lifted the cards up off the table and started, rummaging through them. And as he would look at a card, he'd look at my son and say, "Fake," and then he would put it down on the table. Then he looked at the next card and he said, "Fake," and then he put it down on the table. And he was doing this with his cards. And my son's face, he was mortified. Like, who is this kid and why is he insulting me and my cards? So, my blood just began to boil. Now, those of you listening, there are some of you that are probably thinking, well, he should have just sat there and took it and figured it out on his own. Yeah, that's true. Maybe he should have. But that's not what I allowed to happen. I just stood up and I walked over there and I took the cards right out of his hand and I said, "Go play over there," like that. And then I handed the cards back to my son. I said, "He's got problems." And then later that day, what I decided to do was take my kids to the store, and I got them some, quote, real Pokemon cards. And why did I do that? Well, I was in the dark about this whole Pokemon deal. But what I didn't want is my children to be in a situation where they could be humiliated when I wasn't around and these types of things. So I wanted to make sure they had what they needed to navigate this cultural space. And for Christmas, they also got this book that was basically everything imaginable about a Pokemon and every imaginable Pokemon out there, what they meant, what their point system was, what they weighed, where they came from, whatever the case may be. I didn't read it, but I remember seeing that book months later, and it looked like somebody's well-worn Bible. They just devoured that thing. And of course, they could hold their own in the Pokemon cultural malaise. But so this was a form of protecting from attack, invasion, loss, or insult by sort of equipping them with what they need to go stand on their own. So I wasn't helicoptering here as much as I was just, stopping a situation that was going to go from bad to worse at the picnic table and then providing them what they needed to go forward on their own. And they could decide to learn this or not learn it. They could use the cards or get rid of them. They could do whatever they wanted, but they had what was necessary to do what needed to be done. Now, translate that into the workplace. Are we providing our people with everything they need to defend themselves against attack, invasion, loss, or insult? Do they know what they need to know in order to do what they need to do, or are you withholding information so that you can have more authority than they've got? And this is where I find we have problems in the workplace with the 15, 16 years I've been working with people in the workplace, where they have this information that if the other individuals were armed with it, it would act as a shield against certain situations in the workplace, but they don't provide it. And the reason why they don't provide it is because many leaders are in competition with their subordinates. And this is a real problem. They're not there to assist people and to make them good at what they do or to help them become good at what they do, provide them with all the necessary ingredients for becoming good at what they do. They're there to feel good about who they are in the world, and they use their subordinates as a means to this end. And that's bad, folks. So if you're doing that, that's something you really need to stop. All right, what's the next piece? Correction. So this is correcting. It's to scold, it's to rebuke, or to teach in order to improve the effects of one's behavior on themselves and on other people. So if you're familiar with axiology, which I've talked about, I've got videos about it on my YouTube channel. I'm writing a book about it currently called Axiology 1, 2, 3, One Mind, Two Worlds, Three Dimensions. So the two worlds are the world around you and the world within you. These are the two worlds. And so, improving the effects of your own behavior and then the behavior of other people is really dealing with these two worlds, the world of self and the world of others, because others are in the outer world. You are in the inner world, your own inner world. So correction is a teaching tool, not a punishing tool. Oftentimes, parents punish their children. They don't correct their children. And so, this is, the difference between discipline and punishment. Oftentimes, we mistakenly define punishment as discipline, but it's incorrect. Punishment is payback, whereas discipline in its rudimentary form is remedial. So discipline is training. We get the word from disciple. So discipline is training with the welfare of the person in mind. It's about acting in accordance to the best interest of their true self. So, how often have you heard a parent say to a child, "You made me look like an idiot in the store, so go to your room." Think about it for a while. Think about that one. I can't say that I heard my mom ever do that. She may have, because I can hear it in my mind, but not necessarily from my mom. But I do remember other people saying this. But I'm not going to say my mom's off the hook for this. She probably did it because that's the way they did it back then. So go to your room and think about it for a while. What good does that do? So this really falls under the punishment category because the best consequences of this action sit on the side of the parent and not the child. The parent feels emancipated about being embarrassed in public, but the child ends up sitting in their room, basically lacking the instruction necessary to avoid the misbehavior in the future. This is classic misplacement. And this is what managers do. They want to pay you back for not making them look good rather than teach you. This is a big problem. It's difficult to train people with them in mind and not yourself and your emotional needs in mind. So punishment doesn't work. Punishment does not work, which is why most people that get out of prison end up back in prison. Punishment is a failed method of behavioral change. So correction is not punishment. It's discipline. And I said that the word discipline is derived from the word disciple, which means disciplined learner. So when children are discipled, or more importantly, trained rather than trounced, they're characteristically better equipped to navigate social groups, competitive environments, and life challenges with better clarity, courage, and contentment. And this ensures a better likelihood of being rather than doing. We want people to be able to be themselves in the world without overthinking what other people are thinking about how they are. I want to put in a disclaimer here for you. You need to realize that every human being is its own entity. Every brain is its own entity. It has its own set of neurons. It has its own set of ideas. It has its own set of concepts. It has its own genetic code, its own DNA sequence. 40 to 47% of who someone is nothing to do with genetic. It has everything to do with genetic components and nothing to do with environmental influence. So it's roughly half and half, give or take a little. So, feeling responsible for every single decision your children make is stupid. A good book about this is called The Nurture Assumption by Judith Rich Harris, if you're interested in that. But when you are a single entity, your decisions are yours, not anyone else's. When you're in the workplace, your decisions are yours. They're not anyone else's. So anyone who's in an authoritative or a leadership position, don't take on the weight of feeling like their decisions are somehow a reflection on you. They usually are not in any way. Now, as a child in the formative years, yes, there is some of that. In any of you that have been in a situation where there's people in conversation and then some screaming child where nobody is telling that child what to do or what not to do. This just happened to me. I was at a Christmas party recently, and there was a kid, I don't know what his age was. I'm going to say he was maybe 6 or 7. And he was over at the piano, which was in the family room. And there was probably 8 to 10 people in that room. And he took both forearms and he was just smashing it down on all the keys as loud as possible. And nobody did anything. And this went on and on and on. So a parent, walking in there and grabbing his upper arm and saying, so-and-so, not now. We're not doing that here. This is poor behavior. what's wrong with you? Uh, all this is going through my mind, of course. So I glared at him, and he caught my eyes with his and stopped for about 3 or 4 seconds, and you could see the switch in his brain where he decided, no, I'm going to keep doing it because you're not the boss of me. I saw it come on, and then he went right back at it, and I just thought to myself, oh boy. Anyway, I got off track. So we're talking about the difference between punishment and discipline. Discipline teaches. Punishment hurts. Okay? We don't want to punish. We want to discipline. Discipline is a process of learning what I should have done versus what I did, whereas punishment does not inform you of anything. All it does is make the punisher feel better about who they are in the world. All right, let's get off of that and get on to the next one. Let me list them for you in order before we get to the next one. So guide, guard, govern, direct, protect, correct. And the next one is cherish. Cherishing, to hold and treat as dear, or to care for tenderly, or to cling to fondly. I don't recommend you cling to everybody fondly at work, but you can cherish them in other ways. So cherishing is a way of announcing your fondness and your tender care towards another human being. So this is easy to do as a parent. It's hard to do as a manager or a leader. So cherishing, so to treat as dear, or to care for tenderly, or to cling to fondly. Now, I'm 56. In my earlier generation, we did things differently. We talked differently than we do today. And I catch myself all the time. So recently I was at an event, and there was probably 100 or so, a little more than 100 people there listening to a speech, a 2-hour talk that I gave on temperament. And everybody in the room had a behavioral readout of their own particular style, their own temperament type and brain type and so on. And it was a really fun time. But after I was done, of course, everybody wanted me to basically read their numbers for them and talk to them a little bit about themselves, or what does this mean or whatnot. And there was a line of probably 25 people. I'm at the back of the room, soaked in sweat, getting my breath, because when I speak, it's basically putting on a show. And then there was a break that came after my talk because it was 2 hours long. And so during that break, rather than go to the bathroom, a lot of people just wanted to get in line real quick to get my quick synopsis of their stuff. So all that to say, this lady came up to me. She looked to be about 29, about my daughter's age. And she said, can you read mine? She said, and she handed me some graphs of hers. And I started talking with her and looking at it. And, and through the process of that conversation, I just called her sweetheart. It just came out. And it was, for me, it was a term of endearment. Now, she wasn't affected by that at all. She was all smiles. I found myself touching her between the shoulder and the elbow on the upper arm as I was talking to her. And as these younger people were coming through, I just saw them like I was talking to my kids. Because I'm old enough to be their dad. But I was cherishing them. I was cherishing their brain types. I was tender in the way I spoke with them, whether male or female. I was fond in those moments. I was, being careful with them, treating them as if they are sensitive or delicate, especially if I saw that in the profile. So, all that to say, as leaders, there's nothing wrong with cherishing the people you work with and that you have authority over in some sense. There's nothing wrong with cherishing children. I know of parents that have never told their children that they love them. They never hug their children, only on special occasions. They never kiss their children, only maybe on special occasions. And then there's those parents who will do that in public, but they don't do it in private. When they're out at an eatery or whatnot. There was a woman I watched one time. I forget where we were, but she had two little ones, and she was really overdoing it. She was talking very loud, fondly to the children, and you could see the children were a little taken aback by the overindulgence in this public space, leaning over the table and wiping their mouths. But here's what was a little bit different about this particular situation. When this woman would praise or talk very fondly, "Do you need anything else, honey? Is everything okay? How's your tummy?" This kind of a thing. She would then look around the room to see who was watching, to see who was noticing her, superb parenting skills. What this led me to believe is that she actually didn't have any. She knew how to play the part, but she likely didn't play it at home. And so she played it publicly simply because there was an inner awareness that this isn't who she is, and it bothered her. And so to be able to do this publicly and other people to see how she was, quote, cherishing the kids, was an issue. And, you could see in the kids' eyes, they were somewhat hollow. The whole thing rung completely hollow. Then you see other parents in the same space, where there's not an over fondness, there's not an over fondling and a tripping over oneself to appear as if they're cherishing the kids. The relationship just is. That's the kid sitting next to the parent with no space in between, calmly eating and looking out the window, and the parent not feeling any particular need to demonstrate their parenthood to the public because it is what it is. So I don't know what kind of people watching you do, but these are the things that I notice. So cherishing people, whether it be your child or a subordinate, is really treating them with respect. It's treating them with care. It's treating them tenderly. You can cling to fondly your children. You don't necessarily cling to fondly subordinates at work, but you need to be there for people. And sometimes it might mean a hug. Sometimes it might mean a touch between the elbow and the shoulder. And so it's important because I'm not going to take this opportunity to talk about the power of touch, but it's very, very important that human beings are touching each other. And I know we've entered a real touch-free society. Just practically speaking, you go into the bathroom at the airport, you likely won't touch anything. You don't touch the faucet. You don't touch the blow dryer. You don't touch the paper towel rack. You don't touch the toilet. Everything flushes itself. The water comes on by itself. The paper towels come out by themselves. The air comes out of the blower by itself. You don't touch anything. So we're really in a touch-free society. We email instead of converse. We text instead of talk. So there's a lot of things happening currently in the world that's going to backfire at some point. But what people will do is they'll just make an adjustment without realizing they made it, and then they'll just move on from it once they see it isn't working. It's really evolutionary how people are going to, survive and move on. There'll be certain people that will realize this isn't working very well and will just go back to the more natural form of communication and things of this sort. I've noticed even in companies where people are right across the hall or across a cubicle, but are still emailing. They're not even speaking. And so cherishing is very important because touch and these types of things are how, our brains are wired. It's how people are made. We are wired for touch. We are wired for communication. We are wired for feeling. Human beings feel. They're not static objects. They're fluid feelers. And so cherishing is part of that. All right. The next thing, nourishing. So we got guide, guard, govern, direct, protect, correct, cherish, nourishing. Nourish. To strengthen, to build up, and to promote. So when we nourish people, we feed them. So we feed anything to strengthen it. We feed our plants, we feed our dogs, and we feed our kids. And this helps build them up to be strong and functional in the world. So there's an emotional nourishing that has to take place. We have to build up, we have to strengthen, we have to promote. That might look like saying to your child, wow, you're really good at this. Or that's a real nice drawing. So you're feeding that child. That was a great golf swing. Wow. That was a great ride as they get off the horse. I'm not talking about lying to the kids. I'm talking about when an accomplishment is made, when something happens, it's good to strengthen that about them, especially if it's something they're really good at. We want to strengthen it. Ancient King Solomon said, train up a child in the way that they should go so that when they are old, they won't depart from it. What he was saying is part of training people up, training children up in the way that they should go is helping to, looking to locate where the things are in their lives that come easy, and then providing more of it. So my daughter was really good at horseback riding, so we got her a horse. We got her lessons. We provided opportunity, so we were sort of training her up in the way that she should go. A lot of parents train children up in the way they want them to go, not where they themselves want to go. My son, he wanted to play football. And when we got him the whole uniform and he started playing football wasn't what he thought it was going to be. It was a lot harder. It was difficult. The coach was an a-hole. All this different stuff. And he came to me and he said, this wasn't what I thought it was. And I said, well, you don't have to do it. He goes, well, you bought the uniform. And I said, don't worry about that. If you don't like it, don't do it. So he ended up trying his hand at piano. He got good at that. He did some golf. He was one of the best on his team. So he liked that. But I wasn't going to force him to play football because I wanted him to play it. I'm trying to train him up in the way he should go, not the way I should go, so that when he's old, he won't be trying to find out what he's good at. He'll already know. And that's really the best thing. So how do we translate this to work? Well, strengthening people, building them up, and promoting them. If somebody's really good at something, they should be promoted. If they need some help to strengthen their abilities or whatnot, you should be there to provide that. So when they hit it on the mark, it's good to say, wow, this is so good. This is why we hired you. And that's just a good feeling. It helps build them up, it helps promote them, and it helps strengthen them in what they do when they are nourished. And then the final piece is admonishing. What is it to admonish? It's to caution, to advise or counsel against it's really against poor decision making. So admonishing is really to remind you of something you already know but forgot. This is not micromanaging, all right? This is admonishing. It's just being one to advise and remind of certain things that aren't in an individual's best interest. So whether you guide, guard, govern, direct, correct, protect, cherish, nourish, or admonish, all of these 9 things are going to be really rudimentary and really helpful in helping, whether it be a child or a subordinate in a work-related situation, become a much better, much more emotionally healthy, functional person in the world. And so those are what make up being a responsible agent. Now, oftentimes when I'm consulting certain people that have certain problems, I will list these for them and I will ask them to tell me which ones they received. Whether it be from parents in a certain situation, depending on what the consulting is, if it's family situation or it's a work situation, I'll go through and I'll say, guide, guard, govern, direct, correct, protect, cherish, nourish, admonish, and I give them the definitions. And I say, let's say, from one or both parents, which one of these did you get? And to the degree that there are issues that we're trying to deal with, I will get back none, or 3, 2, 1, 4. And I find this astounding, that the more of these that are lacking, the more difficulties people seem to have. But when I see that these things have been present, the less difficulty people have. Is this everything? Is this the only 9 things in the world? Of course not. These are just 9 behavioral elements that can be, implemented while working with, training, bringing up kids, or nurturing and bringing up leaders in a work situation, that are going to be really helpful to produce sort of a well-rounded individual within that space. So I hope this has been helpful. I want to say them again. Guide, which is assisting people through difficult situations as they're traveling through the world, whether it be formative years or navigating a new job, to ensure that they reach their destination. Guarding is really keeping them safe from harm, danger, carefully watching over them. Governing is really exercising a directing or a restraining influence over them in order to provide better outcomes through times of pressure, difficult decision-making, and so on. Directing is really managing and supervising, assisting and directing the course of their actions, whether it be in world or at home or work. Protecting, defending, guarding from attack, invasion, loss, or insult. Correcting, to teach in order to improve the effects of one's behavior on themselves and other people. Remember, this is not punishment. cherishing, to hold and treat as dear, or to care for tenderly, or to cling to fondly, nourishing, strengthening, building up, and promoting them when necessary, and admonishing, cautioning them, advising them, counseling them, reminding them of things they already knew but have forgotten. So I hope this is helpful. So this is Steve Sisler, and you've been listening to the Behavioral Insights Podcast.